And now I'm so excited for our plenary session, Healing Our Planet, Healing Ourselves. And I'm going to turn it over to two amazing board members and wonderful colleagues, Kenji Hakuta and Diego Roman. Come on up, Kenji and Diego.
Good morning. On Wednesday evening, as I was getting on the elevator and just kind of orienting myself to those elevators, I was lost and looking on the floor for the opening reception, and I ran across someone to whom I turned and I asked if he knew what floor it was on, and he guided me. And that person, I realized, was Vik Mohan. He had just arrived from a long flight from the UK and New York, and we talked about sort of travel, logistics, and that sort of thing. But he had already figured it out, and he showed me, he said, oh, there are 2 floors here, and this, that. Anyway, so, and in looking at his resume and what he's about to tell us about today, this should not be surprising at all. He's a listener who takes in his environment and finds ways to be helpful. As a doctor accompanying a team of marine conservationists to Madagascar, he observed and listened to the health needs of the community and got to work in helping them out. What impresses me most is his ability to listen and reshape the problem space. And as I hope he will tell us about, he models and helps others in the field do the same. He's not just helping individuals and communities, he's helping organizations build their capacity to listen and to help. So I'm going to let Diego, he's here, do a more formal introduction, but I want to extend my welcome and thanks to Vik Mohan for coming all the way to Pittsburgh to share his story.
Hello, everyone. My name is Diego Roman, and I am super excited to introduce Dr. Vik Mohan, and doing this with Kenji, who was my advisor during grad school. It's an honor to do both things. Dr. Vik Mohan is a practicing doctor, former director of community health at Blue Ventures Conservation, life coach and well-being practitioner. Working with fishing communities in southwest Madagascar, he saw how poor health was impacting the community's abilities to engage in marine conservation. At the request of partner communities, he led development of Blue Ventures Community Health Program and integrated it into their fisheries and marine conservation programming. Having witnessed firsthand how this strengthened community engagement in conservation, as well as improved community health, he now focuses on supporting other organizations to replicate this health environment approach. Having worked for 2 decades in conservation, he has seen firsthand the impact that working in the environmental sector can have on the well-being of those working in it. He now works with conservation practitioners, leaders, and teams to ensure that those undertaking this vitally important work continue to thrive. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Vik Mohan.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Do you have a clicker somewhere?
Oh yeah, I'm hiding it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. As you've already heard about listening, one of the greatest doctors of the 19th century famously said, if you listen to your patient, they will tell you the diagnosis. So as a practicing doctor, I'm constantly reminded of the importance of listening. But as you've heard, I've spent 20 years working in marine conservation with coastal communities in the tropics. And so, what if we applied Osler's same great wisdom, not just to individuals, but to whole communities? What could we create if we were willing to listen to communities at the front line of conservation and were willing to respond to what we heard? When I first listened to fishing communities in Madagascar, I completely changed what I decided to do with my life. What they taught me is that efforts to protect our oceans are failing. Failing to safeguard our magnificent ocean biodiversity, failing to protect the livelihoods of the hundreds of millions of people living in the coastal tropics who rely on fishing for food and for income. People like Noriko. Noriko is a fisherman living on the Indian island of Madagascar, and he's about to go on a journey. Taking his family with him, he's going to sail for 9 months, 600 miles in a simple dugout canoe in search of better fishing. Noriko and his family are Vezu, the people of the sea. These are semi-nomadic, seafaring communities who rely on the sea for food and for income. If they didn't fish, they wouldn't eat. Their very cultural identity stems from their relationship with the ocean. There are more and more people in Noriko's community who are making this migration every year. And they're doing that because their local fisheries are collapsing. A generation ago, Noriko would have been able to catch enough fish to feed his family in just a couple of hours. Now, he faces ever more competition from more and more fishermen and fisherwomen, as well as competition from international fishing vessels, fueled by a demand for seafood for our dinner tables, thousands of miles away, and subsidized by our taxes. About 20 years ago, I joined a newly founded marine conservation organization called Blue Ventures. And they were working with Vezu communities. Through a process of listening and building trust, they developed a shared understanding of this problem. It's overfishing that is the biggest driver of marine biodiversity loss around the world. And together, with the Vezu communities, they were able to develop and test solutions to try and solve this problem. And this culminated, excuse me, I'm a bit nervous. And this culminated in the development of the region's first locally managed marine area. Under this initiative, communities themselves were able to secure legal protection for their fishing grounds, for their stretch of ocean. They banned destructive fishing practices. They set aside areas of the ocean for recovery, so that, as a temporary fisheries closure to allow fish stocks to recover. And they set aside areas of oceans where the marine ecosystems could recover. And what we saw, fish stocks started to rise, livelihoods bounced back, and ocean diversity started to return. When I first arrived in this remote and beautiful place, my role was to look after the health of the conservation team. Actually, it soon became clear they were perfectly healthy. They didn't really need me. So I became interested in the health of the community. So I listened. And what I heard was every bit as disturbing as what we'd heard about fisheries. This is Irene. Irene was still at school when she became pregnant and was unable to complete her education as a result. She was a really bright lady. When Blue Ventures first started working in southwest Madagascar, Vezu communities had little or no access to healthcare. If women like Irene, for example, had wanted to access family planning or wanted to see a midwife, she would have had to walk 30 miles through semi-desert and keep her fingers crossed that the clinic was open. A lack of access to any kind of safe birthing meant that Irene would have probably given birth at home, without a skilled attendant, without running water, and possibly without any light. Women like Irene are 5,000 times more likely to die in pregnancy and childbirth than women in my home country in the UK. A lack of access to any kind of sexual health education meant that girls were becoming sexually active at a very young age. Couples were having more children than they intended, and all of this was impacting the health of their children. Women like Irene told us how they were desperate for better access to healthcare, and to family planning in particular, as it turned out. Men were keen to use family planning too. Dwindling fisheries could no longer support large families, and they could see a clear link between family size and food security. The more we listened, the more we could see that poor community health was limiting the community's ability to engage in marine conservation. And the more we talked about health, the more the community asked us for help. But Blue Ventures is a marine conservation organization. How can we possibly engage in healthcare? But what I'd seen stayed with me long after I'd returned home. These communities are so remote. The only way in and out was by boat or oxen cart. It could take them 3 days to get to the nearest hospital. There was nobody there to provide healthcare. And yet there we already were, working with them, working alongside them, and they trusted us. I've never seen such an unmet need for healthcare, and I was really moved to respond. So, after a full 2 years of planning, and in what felt like a pretty bold move for a conservation organization, we opened the doors to Blue Ventures' first community health service, initially focusing on family planning because that's what the community had asked us for first. Now, I was excited about this, really excited about this new initiative, but we were completely unprepared for what was to happen. On that very first day of the very first clinic in 2007, 20% of all women of reproductive age came asking for family planning. On that very first day, we opened the doors to the clinic and were greeted by the sight of a beach full of women and couples wanting to be seen. Laughing. They were having fun, they were laughing, they were singing, playing games with their children, waiting patiently to be seen. We worked until it was too dark to see. We had no power, and yet the beach was still full. So we promised everybody that we would come back and make sure everybody was seen, and that's what we did. Now, the stories I heard from women and girls on that day will always stay with me. They taught me more about what life is like for vaso communities than I'd possibly imagined. But more importantly, on that day, Blue Ventures changed. We became an organization that dared to think differently about marine conservation and were willing to respond to the needs of frontline communities. And it turns out that one of the most transformational things you can do is offer healthcare. Fast forward a few years, and we'd expanded the service to reach everyone that we were working with along a huge stretch of the west coast of Madagascar with healthcare. And to do this, we trained local women to become community health workers. And that meant that of 120,000 people spread amongst nearly 200 villages on the remote west coast, no one was more than 2 miles away from a healthcare worker. And these community health care workers could provide maternal and child health care, reproductive health services, water and nutrition initiatives to improve the health of their communities. And this health care delivery was supported by a rich and diverse program of community health education. We used music, we used drama, we used sporting events to promote breastfeeding, to raise awareness about the importance of sleeping under a mosquito net, to promote the value of birth spacing, to promote vaccinations. Whatever community gathering we could, we talked about health. And the beautiful thing was, when we had gatherings with communities, because our work was fully integrated with marine conservation, we engaged diverse audiences with a variety of messages. So, for example, men would come to our meetings to discuss fisheries, but they'd get to learn about childhood immunization. They'd get to learn about family planning. Women would come to these meetings to learn about the latest child health initiative, but they'd get to take part in discussions about fisheries for the first time. And perhaps most importantly of all, because we were delivering integrated messages, we could clearly draw the link between ocean and human health. So, what results did we see? Well, proportion of women using a modern method of contraception went up from less than 10%, it jumped sixfold to nearly 60%, which is comparable to the figures here in the US. And the proportion and the general fertility rate, which is the number of live births per woman per year, fell to less than half of what it was before we started. Women were breastfeeding their children for longer. More children were getting vaccinated. More children were getting treated for life-threatening infections like malaria and diarrhea. The community was getting healthier. Now, of course, these are the results that we'd all hoped for. But some of what we saw was completely unexpected. And it's these unexpected results that almost excite us the most. Because women were healthier and were better able to space their pregnancies for the first time, they were better able to engage in fisheries. Women using our services were earning twice as much money as women who weren't. They were able to invest in their children's education. They were able to save for the future. Women started to take greater interest in fisheries management and marine protection. More and more women took on management responsibilities for managing marine resources, typically a male responsibility. Yeah? At a community level, because we were offering healthcare, because communities were becoming healthier, they felt more empowered. They felt better able to engage in alternative livelihoods, reducing reliance on fishing, reducing pressure on the ocean. What was most exciting for us as a marine conservation organization was because we were offering a service that communities really valued, that strengthened their trust in us. And they were more willing to engage in the complex, long-term work of rebuilding fisheries and helping to restore ocean life. As for Irene, she was able to delay having another child. To earn a livelihood, she started to grow seaweed in the lagoon in front of her village. Her confidence grew. She was able to build a home and able to pay for her son's school fees. She became a passionate advocate of our community health program. Thank you. And about this time, Southwest Madagascar was hit by the worst cyclone in living memory. Sadly, an all too frequent occurrence now. And coastal communities are particularly vulnerable to the effects of climate change, with more and more extreme weather events, loss of their land, and ocean acidification and ocean warming disrupting their fisheries. And in the wake of this cyclone, which caused huge devastation and loss of life, it was the community and no aid agency that led the response. These community health workers traveled by foot from village to village to make sure that their schedule of clinics was not disrupted. And they were able to reach everybody with vital education about how to purify the well water that had been contaminated from flooding, how to protect themselves against malaria, and how to treat cholera and diarrhea. They were able to gather information about who was most vulnerable and relay that to the local marine management team, who could then marshal resources and direct it to where it was most needed: emergency food, raw materials for rebuilding their homes. The community were able to do something that no agency was able to do. This was resilience in action. And this was resilience shored up by this holistic approach to marine conservation. And when COVID hit, we saw the same thing. The local marine management team, who could no longer work because of lockdown, pivoted to join our community health effort, to raise awareness about coronavirus, to help minimize transmission, to protect the most vulnerable, and when it was available, to help promote uptake of the vaccine. And because we had expertise in health and in conservation, we were able to help communities to maintain a livelihood from fishing whilst minimize the risks of getting COVID. So inspired by this model, our vision has now been to enable as many people as possible to benefit from this holistic approach to marine conservation. Through exchange visits, people like Irene and Noriko are able to share their experiences with people from other parts of Madagascar, who then are inspired to take these ideas home with them. We've worked out that the quickest way to enable this holistic approach to be replicated at scale is by building bridges across sectors. So we formed a network in Madagascar to build bridges, where we form partnerships between healthcare providers and local community-based conservation organizations who are working with remote, vulnerable communities. The healthcare providers benefit from being able, they benefit by being able to leverage the operational infrastructure and strong community relationships of those conservation organizations, reaching more communities with their services, and the conservation organizations benefit from working with healthier, more engaged communities. And the communities get more and more of their needs met. What started in Madagascar, serving just 2,000 people, started to attract the attention of marine conservation groups throughout the coastal tropics. And by the time I left Blue Ventures, we were supporting partners to replicate this approach in Indonesia, in India, East Africa, as far west as Peru, with 1 million people in the coastal tropics benefiting from this holistic way of working. But you know what? Wherever we end up, Southwest Madagascar will always be the spiritual home of this way of working. Vezu means, among other things, to struggle with the sea. And Vezu communities continue to struggle with their ever-changing seascape. But at least now, they have the tools and resources to live in real harmony with the ocean. At least now, they enjoy better health. And women are having a say in the way marine resources are managed. At least now, they have the tools and resources to become more resilient to whatever challenges they face. When we listened to communities, they really did give us the diagnosis. And they taught me an important lesson. Integrating healthcare into marine conservation not only improves health, but it enables communities to better protect the ocean. Something they do for all of us. I feel very privileged to have witnessed firsthand the magic that can be created when you put communities at the center of the conservation challenge. When you dare to think holistically about their needs, and when you build bridges across sectors. Now, I believe this holistic way of working could be replicated in all kinds of ecosystems, not just marine. But if we think about oceans alone just for one moment, there are hundreds of millions of people living in the coastal tropics alongside the same magnificent biodiversity, the stewards of our ocean biodiversity. Many of them face the same challenges as the Vesu. Yeah? Just imagine what we could create if all of those people were met with the same willingness to respond to their needs, the same willingness to listen. Just imagine what we could create. Imagine our oceans once again teeming with some of the most magnificent biodiversity our planet has ever seen. Imagine communities being able to enjoy good health and an abundance of food from the sea, securing the knowledge they will always be able to provide for their families. Imagine these communities becoming truly resilient to climate change. Now that is the future that we can create. But there's another layer to this story, another dimension, another stakeholder group. And that's us. Us. Those of us working to protect our biodiversity, those of us working for climate justice, those of us using education to create a just and sustainable future. Now, what I've shared with you is a success story. Well, at least I think it is. Yeah? But it comes at a cost. And what I've seen in my 20 years in conservation is more and more of my peers getting stressed, getting burnt out, getting sick, giving up on their dreams and leaving the sector just because it's too tough. At a personal level, this is a tragedy. At a sector level, it's an evolving workforce crisis. And so for the last 10 years, I've been combining my hats again, my hat as a doctor with my skills and my expertise as a practitioner in conservation, to try and understand why this is and what we can do about it. So the rest of my time is going to be about us and about our well-being. And what I've learnt is that there are three broad drivers to the stress that many of us feel. Oh, sorry. Yeah, hang on a second. Yeah, there are three. My mistake. Oops. I was so slick until then, right? I was so good. Yeah, I'm human too. I'm so sorry. There are three broad drivers to the stress that we feel as a community. At least that's what I see. The first is that the work is tough, right? Whether you're trying to persuade people about the importance of taking action on climate change, trying to persuade people about protecting our environment, whether you're fighting for climate justice, whatever it is, it's tough work. And if you're experiencing conflict, if you're witnessing environmental degradation, if you're witnessing suffering, that takes its toll on us, yeah? And we're learning increasingly that takes a physical toll on us, as well as an emotional and a mental one. So it's tough work. Secondly, the environmental sector was never really designed to look after the well-being of its workforce. Now, NAAEE is a beautiful example of an exception to that rule. And thank you to Judy and the team for doing such a good job at nurturing us all. So thank you. But that has been the exception, yeah? And what I see in the sector is a growing sense of urgency and a growing mismatch between the size of the task and the resources we have at our disposal. And so whatever resources we have, we just focus on getting the job done with very few resources left for us. That's what I see. And there's a kind of ethos that, well, if you really cared about it, you just suck it up. Yeah? You know, and there's this subliminal ethos that, well, you just got to die for the cause. Yeah? It's okay to die for the cause because you care so much. It's so noble that, you don't matter. Yeah? And dying for the cause does not serve us or our mission. Yeah? And thirdly, there's something about us. Those of us who engage in this work, there's something about us that contributes to our vulnerability. And it's the same things that have made us successful. It's the fact that we care so deeply about the work we do. That means that when things don't go the way we want, it's really painful for us. It's the fact that we are willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done. Work evenings, weekends, whatever. Yeah? It means we're probably more likely to burn out. It's the fact that we all have such a clear idea of the world we want to create. Such a clear vision for this, so often, that when things fall short of our vision, our aspirations, we can be pretty hard on ourselves and on others. And that can cause us problems. I could go on, right? So these are the same things that have made us successful. That at times of stress, can undermine us. Another way of thinking about that is your strengths will betray you. Yeah? In the wrong set of circumstances. Yeah. And the other thing is, the other internalization we do is that success relies on hard work. So when we get more work, we just work harder. And it reaches a point where that's not going to work anymore. Yet we just keep doing what we've always done. That's our operating system. We don't change our operating system. We keep trying to work harder and harder. And it stops working. We stop ignoring the signs of stress. We ignore the signs of stress. We stop attending to our basic needs. And that's when we burn out. So burnout was first described by a psychologist in the 60s who saw this constellation of features in people who were getting exhausted and disengaged as a result of overwork. But this is my favorite definition. Yeah? I think you're laughing because you know what he's talking about. Yeah? We know when we're stressed. We know when we need a break. We know when we'd love a chat with a loved one, or we would love to go for a coffee and have a chat. We know when we need some fresh air, when we need a bit of joy. And yet we ignore those things at our peril. And the longer we ignore those signals, the less those signals work. We stop noticing them, or somehow they stop working, and we normalize what's happening to us, and we get burnt out. Yeah? So what do we do about that? Well, like I said, I've been working in this for 10 years. I've been doing a lot of research on the building blocks and determinants of well-being, and I've been working with conservation practitioners literally all around the world now. I'd love to share with you 10 years of research. I can't. But I'm going to share with you my top well-being hacks. If you do nothing else, I think this is a good foundation. So, and when I say good self-care, I mean a good diet, enough water to drink, exercise, sleep, and rest. And the things to suffer the most, I see, is sleep and exercise. Yeah, that may not apply to all of you. When I see these mission-passionate people, they steal from their well-being. They steal from their well-being by going without exercise, by going without good food, by going without sleep. They are stealing from their well-being. Yeah? We all know this to be true. There's so much data that all of this stuff is important. And yet, how many of us have not had enough water to drink in the last week because we've just been a bit too busy? Yeah. How many of us have not taken enough exercise just because we've not found the time? How many of us have had a bit too late of a night just because I wanted to get that piece of work done? Yeah? We are stealing from our well-being. And yet, when we're busy, this is when we need this stuff the most. Beautiful Zen proverb. You must sit in meditation for 20 minutes a day. Unless you're really busy. Yeah? Yeah? In which case, do it for an hour. Yeah? So we give these things up when we need them the most. Now, if we were performance athletes training for the Olympics, do you think we'd skip a meal? Do you think we'd have a late night? And yet what is demanded of us is no less than what's demanded of a performance athlete. Let's treat our bodies in the same way. Okay. So I think inner well-being is predicated on self-awareness. Understanding what's going on for you, understanding how you're responding to the world moment by moment. And that can be cultivated through practice. It's not a destination, it's a minute-by-minute practice. That can be meditation, it can be yoga, it can be journaling. It can be anything that just enables you to connect with and be aware of what's going on for you moment by moment. Because it's that self-awareness that gives us the choice to respond to the situation we find ourselves in. And self-awareness correlates with well-being. Now, we're really lucky in this room that we probably all feel that we have a really clear sense of purpose in our work. And what a gift. What a gift. Let's cherish that. And let's make sure that the demands of the day job don't detract from that connection with the purpose. Let's keep our eyes on the prize, yeah? And stay connected with why we do what we do, yeah? Irrespective of emails, spreadsheets, whatever it is that's taking us away, yeah? And what I've realized is what I'm sharing is what we've talked about already at this conference. So many recurring themes. Something I've heard time and again is in this week in particular, how much people are really valuing being in community, being together. Yeah? So let's nurture and cherish those relationships, personal and professional, that enable us to thrive. And let's stay connected with the people that are important to us. Now, the single biggest practical challenge I see in my conservation colleagues is drawing effective boundaries. And the challenge is, if you're really passionate about what you do, if you have real purpose, it can be hard to find the off switch, right? Yeah? It can be hard to turn off at the end of the day. So the challenge for us is drawing boundaries comfortably and confidently in a guilt-free way that allows us to have space between us and work. Yeah? And the guilt-free bit is important. Because if you're ambivalent about the boundaries you see, when you communicate those boundaries, people will see the ambivalence and not the boundary. So it's about making peace with the boundary yourself first, understanding why that boundary is important for you before you convey it to others. And again, we've heard about this today already, joy. The wonderful thing about well-being and the route to well-being is it's not linear. We all know that after a really tough week, you can have a really wonderful evening with close friends and feel better again. After a tough day at the office, you can put on your favorite piece of music and in 5 minutes experience joy and peace, right? Yeah? So let's nurture and celebrate and harness unashamedly those things that give us joy. Unashamedly, whether it's dancing around your living room, whether it's spending time with loved ones, whether it's enjoying the sunset, whatever it is, let's unashamedly invest in that which gives us joy. Now, this is a little top tip for those who might be experiencing some stress or worried about burnout. One of the quickest ways of kind of recalibrating and feeling a bit better is by entering your opposite world. Yeah? And what I mean by your opposite world is where you go where it's nothing like your work. Yeah? Where there are no demands on you, you're not expected to lead, you're not expected to be a scientist, a communicator, a manager, manage spreadsheets. You know, you can just go and be yourself in a different world. Yeah. So for many years, my opposite world, because I'm a doctor and I'm a conservationist, and it's all a bit grown up, you know, and so my opposite world was I was a radio DJ. So so I used to go to the radio studio and take in a pile of my favorite tunes. And for 2 hours, I would just play my favorite tunes. No one knew I was a doctor. No one knew I was a conservationist. No one knew I was anything other than just a radio DJ. And it was just so therapeutic to just escape into my opposite world. Yeah. So where's your opposite world? Where nothing's demanded of you. You can disappear. Now, I sometimes speak to colleagues who can be very achievement-orientated and go, "Oh, Vic, don't worry about my well-being, because yes, I'm busy, but I'm training for a marathon." Yeah. Oh, and I think, great, exercise is really good for your well-being. That's a really good thing to be doing. But there's something about that feels a bit achievement-orientated. Yeah. And so by all means, do the marathon because you'll get a sense of achievement and exercise and discipline. Wonderful. It's not really your opposite world, though. Yeah. So have a think about where your opposite world might be. Maybe find it if you haven't thought about it before. And the final thing is self-compassion. And I would distill self-compassion down to 3 things. Yeah? Self-awareness, a recognition of our common humanity, you know, we're all the same, and being kind to ourselves when things are tough. Kind to ourselves. What I often see is that people who are really good at showing compassion to others, not so good at showing it to themselves. I don't know why. Can you show yourselves compassion? Can you be your own best friend? Can you show yourself the same care that you would show a loved one? So those are my top tips. I'm going to put my slide clicker down now. I would love you to share these ideas with the world. They're born of many years of research and practice, so I'd love you to share these ideas. And as Judy says, I'm around all week and would love to talk to anybody who's willing to listen to me prattle on about well-being or just have a conversation about that. So please do come and find me if you'd like to talk. What I'm about to share with you, I'll be grateful if it doesn't leave this room. Okay? And the reason for that is because I'm going to share my own well-being journey. So, about 12 years ago, I had one of those years that you only want to have happen once a decade, or maybe just once. I'd just come out of a very difficult relationship where my partner had been experiencing really quite severe mental health difficulties. And by the way, I hope this isn't too triggering or upsetting for anybody. But, so by the end of that time, I was really functioning as a carer, more of a carer than a partner. It was stressful. It was exhausting. And during that time, it was so all-consuming that I gave up all the things that I loved. Gave up being a DJ. Gave up, you know, all the things that really gave me joy. And because it was so difficult to talk about my experience, it was just easier to cut myself off from the world. So I cut myself off from all of my friends. So I emerged from this very difficult relationship exhausted, physically, emotionally, and isolated. Work was super busy. We were struggling to recruit support staff for me, so I was working all hours just to keep the lights on, just to keep the show on the road. And I was exhausted, and I had no support, and it was a really difficult year. And in that year, I lost 6 friends and colleagues, people that were close to me, as a result of accidents, as a result of suicide, as a result of other premature death. So I experienced multiple bereavement and I had no support. And I was exhausted and probably burnt out. And you know what? I just wish I knew then what I know now about well-being. I know that it would have been a less painful year. And I'm a doctor, right? And I have to pay very good attention to my own health. I've got to protect patients from harm as a result of my own health, right? And I was amazed I didn't get ill. I was amazed I didn't get ill that year, given everything I was coping with. And I'm the well-being guy, so I've given that a lot of thought, and I've distilled it down to 3 things. Firstly, I was determined that this set of challenges was not going to beat me. I think you'd call that the human spirit. Secondly, I got incredible meaning from my work in marine conservation. It felt so meaningful. It was kind of an oasis of meaning at a time when life had begun to feel pretty meaningless, to be honest. Yeah. And thirdly, I was convinced that there was something important for me to learn. And I'm going to share that with you. What I learned is that we matter. We matter. And so, yes, your well-being matters because you all do vitally important work, and we desperately need you to continue the amazing work you do. But it goes so much deeper than that. Your well-being matters because you matter. Because we are children of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. And we have a right to be here. And in this challenging time, when we need your work more than ever, you are the light at the end of this tunnel. So please know, when you leave this conference, that you matter. Let's treat ourselves like performance athletes. Let's show ourselves the same compassion we show those we love. Let's create a world where the well-being of the environmentalists is as important as the well-being of the environment. And I thank you for what you do.
We want you to stay here.
Okay.
Judy, yes, the executive director is telling us. We have time for a couple of questions from the Sea Change Fellows, and I believe, yes.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. So we know Rome wasn't built in a day. What would you say to someone who's burnt out and starting day one of their well-being journey?
Someone who's burnt out on day one of their well-being journey?
Yep.
Whew. Start by knowing that you matter, you truly matter, and that as you are is enough. You are enough, and that you have the resources within you to meet your needs. Yeah? Listen to your body. And if the first thing you need is to take a break, then you take that break and celebrate that. Don't have any shame in taking the break you need, addressing what you need, because you are your most precious resource. Is that a good place to start? Oh yeah, and then get some exercise. And some sleep.
Yes.
Yeah? But it's got to start with knowing that we are important, because unless we do that, we're not going to be able to really do that and celebrate our well-being, you know? And self-care is not selfish. Self-care means me too, not me first, right? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. You're very inspirational. As you mentioned, we contribute to our vulnerability because we care so deeply. What do you recommend doing when you see the signs of burnout in a colleague or a staff member who struggles to draw the line and take time for themselves?
I'm sorry, that didn't come across very clearly. Do you get?
If you have a colleague who's burnt out, how do you help them? Or if you notice that they're burnt out?
Yeah, right. That's a really good question. So I think that starts with creating a culture in an organization where the workforce matters, creating a culture in an organization where it's okay to talk about well-being, yeah? So we need to be okay to talk about our well-being and talk about the well-being of others. Creating safety where it's okay to say when we're not okay, yeah? Creating safety where it's okay to ask if you're okay. And actually not just be satisfied with, yeah, good, I'm fine. No, how are you really? Keep asking the question until you get the answer you think you need. Yeah? So let's create a culture where we recognize that we all matter as a workforce. Let's create a culture where we can talk about well-being. Let's create a culture where people feel safe to show up as who they truly are, and where it's okay to ask real, authentic questions about how people are. And you know what? You may be surprised by what happens if you really show care. And actually, when people are really burning out, they sometimes feel like it's too late, I can't do anything, and they get in this tunnel vision about that nothing's going to help. Simply saying to that person, I'm concerned about you, I'm worried that you're not okay, I see you, it's okay not to be okay, I'm here. That alone can be a wonderful first conversation. Does that help? It's not rocket science, right? It comes back to what we said yesterday about how important it is to be human. All we're doing is being human again, right? Any other questions?
Thank you so much, Vik. One follow-up question to that. For those of us who work in organizations that want to do what NAAEE is trying to do, cultivate that culture of well-being, could you share a couple examples of routines or systems you've seen organizations put in place to encourage these conversations and create that culture?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I think it comes down to leadership, yeah? Encouraging the organizational leaders to model good well-being and good self-care. If we can encourage our leaders to do that, and if you can't start at the top, start wherever you can. Encourage leaders to model good self-care, firstly, and encourage anybody. In fact, when I say that, we can all be leaders wherever we are in the organization. You don't have to be the CEO, right? So modeling good self-care and model vulnerability. If we can model vulnerability and model creating safety, but that can have all kinds of ripple effects. That's how I would start. And then once people think, actually, well-being's important, actually it's okay to say when we're not okay, then what beautiful things will follow. Does that help?
Thank you so much for that talk. We have so needed it.
Thank you.
It was fantastic. And I think you're going to have a lot of people who want to talk to you, including me. I need about 100 hours or whatever.
Thank you. Thank you.